Lewis Hamilton didn't just finish 7th in Miami. He exposed a gap Ferrari can't hide anymore. One lap earlier, the car felt incredible, one of the best all season. Then suddenly, it was almost 0.8 slower when it mattered most. Same car, same session, completely different reality. That's not a bad lap. That's proof Ferrari isn't just behind, they're losing control of their own performance. Coming into Miami, Ferrari didn't look like a team that was 3 steps behind. They looked like a team about to break through. From the very first phase of qualifying, everything pointed in the right direction. Leclerc was right at the top, almost matching the fastest time. Hamilton was just behind, smooth, controlled, no signs of instability. Nothing forced, nothing desperate, just a car that was working exactly as it should. And that's always how dangerous performances begin. Quietly. Then the second phase arrives, and suddenly Ferrari isn't just competitive. They're leading. Leclerc goes fastest. Hamilton jumps into 3rd. And more importantly, the feeling of the car changes completely. It becomes sharper, more responsive, more precise. Every corner connects, every input works, every exit feels clean. That's not just speed, that's confidence. And that's where Hamilton's statement becomes critical. Because when a driver says the car feels incredible, it means everything is aligned. Balance, grip, energy deployment, all working together. That's the moment where pole position becomes real. And Ferrari had that moment. They weren't chasing. They weren't hoping. They had the pace to control the session. But here's where the tension begins to build. Because in Formula One, finding performance once means nothing. You have to repeat it, under pressure, in the final phase, on one single lap. And everything Ferrari showed up to that point, everything that suggested they were ready to fight for pole, was about to be tested in the only moment that actually matters. And that's exactly where everything starts to fall apart. One lap, and everything Ferrari built disappears. Leclerc goes first. The pace is still there, the potential is real, but one small mistake in Sector 2 is enough. Just a slight loss of momentum, just a fraction of time, and the fight for pole is gone. That's the first warning. But Hamilton's lap is where the real story begins. Because there is no clear mistake. No lock-up. No big slide. Nothing you can point at and say, that's where it went wrong. He completes the lap, and it's simply not there. 7th place. Almost 0.8 behind Norris. And suddenly, nothing makes sense. Because minutes earlier, this was one of the best cars he had driven all season. Now it's not even close. Same session, same conditions, completely different performance. And that's where his words become critical. Something didn't work. Not, I made a mistake. Not, I lost time here. Something didn't work. That changes everything. Because drivers at this level don't miss that kind of lap without knowing why. They feel everything. Every change in grip. Every shift in balance. Every limitation. So when the performance disappears and they can't immediately explain it, that's when it becomes dangerous. Because now it's not about execution. It's about understanding. And Ferrari doesn't fully understand what just happened. Think about the pattern. Strong in the first phase. Dominant in the second. Gone in the final. That's not random. That's a car that reaches a peak and can't sustain it. And that's the real problem. Because in Formula One, performance is not about how fast you can be once. It's about how often you can repeat it. Ferrari found the speed. They felt it. They proved it. But when it came to the one lap that defines everything, they lost it. And that's where the gap really appears. Not in raw pace, but in control. Because while McLaren finds performance and holds it, Ferrari finds it and loses it. And over time, that difference becomes massive. Not 1/10, not 2, an entire step behind. And that's exactly what Miami exposed. And this is where the real meaning of that gap finally becomes clear. Because this isn't just about Ferrari losing performance. It's about when they lose it. And in Formula One, timing is everything. In the early phases, when pressure is lower, when the track is still evolving, when drivers are building confidence, Ferrari looks complete, fast, sharp, competitive. In the middle phase, when the tires are working, when everything starts to come together, they look unstoppable. They lead, they control, they believe. But in the final phase, when the pressure is highest, when the track is at its best, when every team extracts everything, that's when Ferrari disappears. And that tells you something very specific. The car doesn't just have a narrow window. It has a fragile one. A window that's easy to enter, but very difficult to stay inside. because the final lap of qualifying is not the same as the rest. Tires are at their peak, but also at their limit. Energy deployment has to be perfect, not just good. The balance has to hold under maximum attack. And that's exactly where Ferrari loses control. Not completely, just enough. And that's the most dangerous kind of problem, because it doesn't look dramatic. It looks small, almost invisible. But at this level, that's all it takes. A slight drop in rear grip, a tiny delay in energy release, a fraction of hesitation from the driver, and suddenly the lap is gone. That's what happened to Hamilton. Not a big failure, a small disconnection. The car no longer doing exactly what he expects at the exact moment he needs it most. And once that connection is lost, the driver can't commit. They don't attack the corner the same way. They don't trust the exit. And that's where tenths disappear, one by one, until the gap becomes real. Almost 8 tenths. And now, that number starts to make sense, because it's not just pace. It's confidence. It's control. It's understanding. And right now, Ferrari is missing all three at the exact moment that matters most. That's why this isn't just a bad qualifying. It's a structural problem, because the car is fast enough. The drivers are good enough, but the system isn't stable enough. And in Formula One, instability under pressure is what separates contenders from winners. McLaren found a way to hold performance. Mercedes, even after losing their advantage, still understands their car. Ferrari? They're still searching for a way to make that incredible feeling last one more lap. And until they find it, every qualifying session will follow the same story. Hope, peak, and then a loss. So when Hamilton talks about that final lap, when he says something didn't work, he's not just describing a moment, he's revealing the truth. Ferrari is not just behind in speed, they're behind in control. And that's why the gap feels bigger than the numbers suggest. Because in reality, and this is where everything finally leads to the uncomfortable conclusion Ferrari can't ignore anymore. Because Miami didn't just expose a weakness, it defined the limit of this car. Not in terms of speed, but in terms of execution. Ferrari doesn't lack performance. They lack the ability to deliver it at the exact moment it matters most. And that's a completely different problem. Because speed can be developed. Upgrades can fix pace. But control, understanding, repeatability, that takes time. And right now, time is exactly what they don't have. Look at the bigger picture. McLaren arrives with a new car, finds performance, and immediately converts it into pole. Mercedes loses part of their advantage and still puts one car on the front row. Ferrari? They find the speed to lead a full segment and end up 4th and 7th. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And patterns in Formula One are what define championships. Because over one session, you can recover. Over one weekend, you can improve. But over an entire season, patterns become reality. And Ferrari's reality right now is clear. They can reach the top, but they can't stay there. And that's where Hamilton's statement becomes even more important. Because when a driver of his experience says something didn't work, he's not just reacting. He's identifying a limitation. A limitation that the team has to solve quickly. Because if they don't, every race will follow the same structure. Strong start, real promise, and then the moment where everything fades. And here's the final piece. The one that connects everything we've seen. This isn't just about Ferrari being behind McLaren or losing to Mercedes. This is about being behind the standard of control that modern Formula One demands. Because today, it's not enough to be fast. You have to be precise, predictable, repeatable, every single lap. And Ferrari right now isn't. So when people look at that 7th place, they see a bad result. But when you look deeper, it's something much more serious. It's a car that can't guarantee its own performance. And in a championship fight, that's not just a weakness. That's the difference between fighting for wins and watching them disappear. And that's the truth Miami revealed. Not that Ferrari is slow, but that when everything is on the line, they're not ready. And this is where the real answer finally becomes impossible to ignore. Because Miami didn't just show that Ferrari is struggling. It showed exactly how far behind they really are. Not in raw speed, but in something much more important. Control under pressure. Think about what we've seen. McLaren arrives with a completely updated car, and in one session, they understand it well enough to take pole. Mercedes loses a key part of their advantage and still manages to extract the maximum when it matters. Ferrari? They find the perfect balance. They feel one of the best cars of the season, and then they lose it in the only lap that defines everything. That's not one step behind. That's multiple layers of disadvantage. Because in modern Formula One, performance is built in stages. First, you create speed. Ferrari has that. Second, you understand how to access that speed. Ferrari is still working on that. But the final stage, the one that decides championships, is being able to repeat it perfectly under pressure. And that's exactly where they fail. That's the third step, the one Hamilton indirectly exposed. Because when he says the car felt incredible and then something didn't work, he's describing a gap between potential and execution, a gap that other teams have already closed. And Ferrari hasn't. That's why the result looks worse than it should. Not because the car is slow, but because the system isn't complete. And in Formula One, incomplete systems don't win titles. They create moments. They create flashes of speed. They create weekends where everything almost works. But almost is not enough. And that's the final truth behind Miami. Ferrari is not fighting from the front right now. They're chasing a standard they haven't fully reached. A standard where performance is not just found, but controlled, lap after lap, session after session. And until they reach that level, every time the pressure rises, the same thing will happen. The car will feel incredible. The expectations will grow. And then, at the exact moment everything is decided, it will disappear. So when Hamilton finished 7th, he didn't just describe a bad lap. He revealed the structure of Ferrari's problem: speed without control, potential without consistency. And in a championship fight, that's not just being behind. That's being 3 steps away from where they need to be.